a lemon pepper. In response to the first part of this morning's video, link down below, I was in a similar predicament. My husband and I had a brief separation before we were married, and I had a relationship with someone else. A few months after my husband, then BF, and I got back together, I discovered that I was pregnant. The only difference for me was that I thought my BF was 100% the father based on a range of conception dates given to me by the OB. We married because we were having a baby and wanted to be a family. About 9 months after my daughter's birth, my husband had doubts about her appearance and DNA tested the baby behind my back. It turned out that he wasn't the father, and this news was absolutely devastating for everyone involved. Even though I did not intentionally deceive him, I was positive the child was his, or so I thought. He still left me and the baby. He wants nothing to do with us, even the daughter he has been raising and loving as his own for almost a year. I wish so badly that I had told him about the relationship I had during our separation, even though I didn't have doubts at the time. If he had known, he would have insisted on genetic testing from the beginning. It would have saved my family a lot of heartache, and my daughter wouldn't have bonded with a father that doesn't love her anymore. I'll be the first person to tell you that fatherhood requires love, not DNA. But just come clean. If he's going to leave you, which I hope he doesn't, it's better for it to happen now. If he leaves now, it will be hard, but at least you won't have grandparents and other family members that have bonded with your child involved, and your baby won't miss what she never had to begin with. My husband instantly hated me when he found out, even though I never intended to trick him. He kicked my child and myself out of the house and has already moved his new GF in, only 3 weeks after we were given the boot. The divorce we are going through is seriously messy. Just save yourself the trouble and be honest now. The truth will come out no matter what, and you want it to be on your terms. I've learned so much from my situation, and if someone else can learn from my mistake before they make the same one themselves, then it's nice to know that at least maybe I can help someone else. Ultimately, it's up to last OP's husband whether he wants to raise a child that's not biologically his. He deserves the chance to make the decision for himself and not be fooled into it. My husband was not one of these men. He dropped us like a hot potato. When I found out I was pregnant, I was already 5 months along. My cycles had been irregular for years, so my due date was calculated from an ultrasound instead of my last missed period. The doctor told me this was the most accurate way to determine the child's gestational age. So, this is where the conception dates came from. All signs pointed to my now husband. The due date was obviously miscalculated, and I ended up having a C-section when my induced labor wouldn't progress at 42 weeks. Now I know it was because I was really only 39 weeks. I would never purposely lie to my husband about something so serious. I was a very devoted, faithful wife, and I loved him unconditionally and would have done anything to save my marriage and keep my family together. The DNA test results shocked me as much as they did him, even though I realize some people don't believe that. My lesson learned is not to trust an ultrasound to give you a conception date, because my child was just measuring big in utero, and the consequences for this mistake are catastrophic. I say that fatherhood does not require DNA because it doesn't. I agree that it's a very important aspect, and no spouse should be lied to, but I make this statement based on the fact that my husband has 2 step-parents. I have lots of friends that are dating, marrying people with children from previous relationships, and I know some same-gender couples that have multiple children. My point is that a family requires love, first and foremost. There are lots of people out there that will love a child unconditionally even if they are not biologically related. I'm not here to insult anyone, pass judgments, or make anyone feel discouraged. I'm simply trying to guide someone to do the right thing. I'm not playing a victim. I'm sharing the negative consequences of my situation in order to possibly keep last OP from lying any more than she already has. And who's to say that I'm the one that's making my divorce messy? If I was here to make my husband seem like a bad person, trust me, I would just say it. I don't feel that way, and words are being put in my mouth. I love my husband very much and I have a lot of empathy for him. I wish my situation did not turn out the way it did for him, for my child, or for myself. Don't speak on matters that you have no knowledge about. This forum is here to help people with their marriages and support people who need it, not to bash them relentlessly. Last Opus is not a terrible person. She made a huge mistake and she needs to fix it. Who knows, he might stay with her regardless of the situation. I hope you can find the courage to tell the truth, because I can assure you that if you don't, it will come out in time. And when it does, it will be much harder to deal with than it is now. Have a little faith in your husband. You can't be sure of his reaction until you tell him. And if he leaves you, I'm sorry, but that's what happens most of the time when you cheat on your husband. Don't feel like anyone is forcing you to get an ex either. Just tell the truth and take it from there. You and your baby will be just fine. Just to be clear, I'm not looking for positive affirmation for my own life. I'm a good woman and mother and nobody will convince me otherwise. I don't need anyone to take my side, and my story is open to interpretation, I suppose. There's only so much you can talk about someone from what they write on the internet, and I realize my situation doesn't necessarily shed much light on the kind of person I really am. You are all entitled to your opinions. I'm just saying, I put myself out there in hopes of keeping someone else from repeating my mistake and having to deal with the hardships to come if she continues to lie. It's not easy for me to be so frank about what has happened to my marriage. It's actually somewhat embarrassing, but I have the best intentions in doing so. Instead of giving the baby up for adoption, tell the truth, face the consequences, and bust your back to create the best life possible for that baby. It's not the end of the world. This situation is actually not all that uncommon, unfortunately. She needs to be honest, but making her feel like her situation is hopeless no matter what is not going to convince her to do the right thing. She needs to know that she can tell the truth, keep the baby, and everything can and will be okay eventually, as long as she doesn't repeat her behavior. My daughter does not look so unlike my husband. She looks exactly like me. If you put her next to her bio father, you would not know that there was a relation. For the past few weeks, I've been struggling to understand why my H would feel the need to get a secret DNA test, and I have gotten my answer, but I will get to that. My husband was not aware of the other relationship. I was 100% positive that my child was my husband's, so I decided the only thing that would come of telling him was hurt. I figured that we were broken up, and to be quite honest, I thought it was none of his business. This was a naive and immature decision, and I will absolutely own up to it. I can only wish that I had done things differently. My H and I had a 5-year relationship prior to the marriage, so it's not like he married me just because I was pregnant. We knew that we would get married at some point down the road and just decided to do it before the baby was born to make things easier. I expressed my concern about the paternity of the child to my OB/GYN, gave her the start and stop dates of both relationships. She assured me I had nothing to worry about. As a young, scared, soon-to-be mother, this put my mind at ease. When my now husband found out I was pregnant, he was, well, less than supportive. He told her he wanted to kick me in the stomach and did not come to even one doctor appointment during the pregnancy. When I was having my C-section, he failed to take any pictures of me and the baby, but instead took pictures of himself in surgical garb. While I recovered in the hospital in the days following the birth, he would go home at night to sleep and not return to see me or the baby until 3 p.m. the next day. For the past 10 months of my daughter's life, I have paid for every diaper, every piece of clothing, all the nursery furniture with my own income. My baby is breastfed, so I never made my H get up in the night for feedings or anything. Not once. I am making these points not to make my H look bad, but to point out that he was not a very involved father and has not suffered a huge financial loss for providing for me and the child. My husband has expressed how sad he is that I let him fall in love with a child that is not his. I told him over and over and over that I never meant to do such a thing, that I loved him unconditionally, and if he wanted to continue to be with the daughter he loved and have his family, that I would do anything to right the situation, including involve the bio father so that he was not the only one being held accountable for the child. This would get him off the hook for child support in the event of a future divorce, etc. I tried to tell him that if he still wanted his family, which it seemed like he did, that we were still here. I pleaded for MC, but he refused, and I don't blame him. I don't blame him for wanting to leave whatsoever. I can empathize with him completely as far as all of that goes. However, here's where my empathy for him ends. Within 2 weeks of kicking myself and our daughter out of the home, he moved another woman in. So now I know why he got the DNA test to begin with. He never wanted to have a baby, and he was having an affair during our marriage. He took a gamble with the DNA test, and it just so happened that he lucked out. He has expressed several times how much happier he is now that me and the baby are gone. He feels so liberated. I'm not going to go into detail about all of the nasty, malicious behavior he has exhibited throughout the past couple weeks because it just isn't necessary. I will say one thing: I am no victim, and I don't pretend to be. My child is healthy, happy, and well cared for. Her biological father is aware of the situation now and is beyond thrilled to have a daughter. He is doing everything possible to make up for lost time. In the end, I couldn't ask for a better outcome for my child. She lost one not-so-great father and gained one that will jump through hoops for her. As far as myself goes, I have made mistakes and I will own them. I can sleep well at night knowing that I made decisions based on what I thought was the right thing to do the entire time. You can form whatever opinions you want of me, I could care less. And I don't appreciate your crude, disrespectful verbiage regarding my physical relationships. Ultimately, I will be much happier when this divorce is said and done, knowing what I know now about my husband. Yes, I screwed up, but despicable I am not. I'm just a regular person going through a hard time and trying to be the best mother I can possibly be. I'm determined to not let this affect my baby, and it would be wonderful if my story could guide someone into making better choices in their own life. My comment: you had a 5-year relationship with your boyfriend, husband, and in a break, you jumped to having unprotected thing with another man. Is nothing special to you. Why wouldn't you want to do everything in your power to make sure if you have a child it is with your long-term boyfriend and not just some guy picking up girls who are in a weak emotional state of mind after a breakup? And you lied to your husband by failing to disclose that relationship. That was wrong any way you cut it. Your husband wasn't that supportive. Do you think that was because in his gut he knew the baby wasn't his and just couldn't prove it until now? Can you imagine how he would feel taking care of a baby and loving a baby and then realizing he is as much related to it as the mailman or garbageman? I think if you were an honorable person you would repay your husband for any money he spent towards you and the alms child. Even if it was a little bit, it would be a gesture to show that you are truly sorry and it wasn't on purpose. And please, for the love of God, make the divorce easy. It's better for everyone. I don't know why you guys couldn't have got an annulment. And to the outside observer, nothing your husband did warrants you trapping him, inadvertently or not, with another man's child. Nothing. That was a horrible, evil thing, even if it was an accident. He bonded with a child for 9/10 months and then found out it wasn't his. You aren't being understanding of how painful that must feel. Can you really not understand why he would have moved on so quickly? You destroyed his heart into a million little pieces. Nasty, malicious behavior is nothing. Honestly, depending on the person, your life would be at risk. What you did was the equivalent of rape in my book. He is allowed to trash you all he wants. He shouldn't hurt you, but he can say nasty things. You accidentally did a nasty thing to him. I'm curious as to how family and friends treat you. Do they understand or are they judgmental? I have to imagine that is quite the scandal. Do they side with your ex-husband? For your baby's sake, I hope you can get child support from the biological father. Odds are if it was a quick relationship, he isn't going to be father of the year material. Just be realistic. For all my comments, I do think you sound like a good mother. I think what you did, if even by accident, was disgusting. The fact that you keep bashing your ex-husband after so deeply wronging him is disturbing. Again, good luck with your child, and I hope everything works out for you. Your ex-husband and your baby are in my prayers. Good job being the mother your baby deserves. Because of your decisions, your baby isn't going to, in all likelihood, have a father around. You need to step up and be both roles. Story 2. I'm 32, wife 28, married 6 years with a 3-year-old son. My wife's coworker and best friend passed 5 months ago. She was devastated. I'll admit my emotional intelligence is quite low. I couldn't find the words to say to comfort her, as usual, but wanted to be there for her if needed. For the next 2 weeks, she spent most nights after work and the weekend with her husband to grieve and plan the funeral. Not alone. His family had flown from across country. I tended to the 2-year-old at home. Maybe a month later, I have a day off and am lying in bed for the morning. Wife had gone to work. She forgot her iPad at home, which at this point is almost exclusively used by our son. A Facebook phone call starts ringing on it. It's her friend's husband. I'm mildly alarmed. Why untraceable Facebook phone calls? How often do they talk? Why during her work hours? Why don't I really hear about him? I get upset and let her know that. I shut down, horrible habit of mine, and ignore all calls, texts. She leaves work to come home and let me know that it's nothing and all they talk about is her late friend. I let it go and feel partly ashamed. The wounds are still very fresh for them and he may not have anyone else to talk to. She deletes the Facebook app on the iPad shortly afterward. Fast forward 4 months. I log into our cell account to change the billing information. I take a look at the usage. She's been talking to him on the phone every day during and after work. Sometimes up to 5 calls a day and up to 40 minutes at a time. He's the first person she calls once she gets out of work. Not a single call when I am present, weekends and after she gets home from work. I can't see any text info as it's all over data. I had no idea they talked that much. She has mentioned him maybe twice in recent months. We are getting some work done on the house. He knows some people in the industry and she would mention that she asked him what he knew about this or that person. But several phone calls every weekday, plus who knows how many texts, blew my mind. She spent more time talking to him on a daily basis than her husband, which I'll touch on later. She couldn't spend my birthday with me because of a required function after work, but I see that he is the first person she calls once she gets out late that night. I start seeing red, blow up, and call her at work. Tell her I want to see every single text between the two. She says she deleted all of them. I tell her that she had better find a way to recover them. She continues to claim they talk about nothing but her late friend, what his future plans are, and that she uses him as her sounding board for work issues since apparently I don't listen. She claims she only ever talks to him on her drive home from work, but many calls are up to 40 minutes. We only live about 20 minutes from her work and she has to pick up the kid from daycare, which means she would have to call him after work and sit in the parking lot for 40 minutes to talk to him before going into the daycare next to her office. I call her out on this and she has no answer for it. Meanwhile, I get home from work and wonder why it takes so long for her to get home some days. She claims to have spent all day trying to recover the text but cannot. Instead, she asks him if he still has any text log. He takes a recording of his phone as he scrolls through the last week or so of texts. All seem benign, almost all revolve around hellos, how was your days, what are you doing, etc. But they are still maybe 5 to 20 texts a day on top of phone calls. And they'll just say hi to each other sometimes 3 separate times of the day. Any weekend texts between the two also occur during periods where she is out of the house without me. Of course, I can't tell if any texts have been deleted. There are some continuity breaks in the texting, but I think I can assume that they are continuations of phone conversations. They text each other more than we text each other. We've been having serious communication issues for years. This isn't the first time I've felt betrayed. 4 years ago, she struck up a brief inappropriate relationship through a phone game. She talked to him through a hidden password-protected chat app. I didn't see the messages, but I don't think it got very far because I caught on early. The whole thing lasted maybe a couple weeks from start to finish, but what do I know? We had a few other trust issues involving our physical life and financials, but I never really regained trust after this event. I've always had serious vulnerability and ego-protecting issues that need to be addressed, but I essentially closed myself off to her emotionally, and have never been able to recover. We haven't had a deep conversation in years. I spend much of the time feeling like we are strangers, and I am definitely much more to blame for this. I'm at a loss for where to go. I'm miles and miles from being a perfect husband. In a lot of ways, I deserve to be alone. Anytime we would hit a rough patch, I would be quick to hit the eject button and she would have to bend over backward to save us. She does probably 80 to 90% of the emotional legwork in this relationship. Naturally, I'm ready to call it quits, but I also know that I need to grow up and face my problems instead of running. I just don't know if I can get past another betrayal, even though it wasn't physical and didn't involve deep emotional connection, as far as I know. Am I taking this too far again? I don't think they were particularly close, but definitely closer than I was with his wife. And this brings back a memory. They would often joke that her husband and my wife were personality twins, and likewise with myself and his wife. He lives maybe 15 minutes away from me. No kids. She spent most of last night trying to convince me that it was all nothing and emphasized the notion that I do not listen to her when she vents about work and needed someone to do that. She also emphasized all the effort she's been putting into recently addressing some other points of tension in our relationship, which is true. However, I was not appreciative of it because I've been on edge about this widening gulf in our communication. I don't specifically recall an apology, but it may have been there. I was kind pretty much in a fog. She offered to block his number and also offered Facebook login. I did what I do best, say I don't care, and shut down. This morning I couldn't sleep and took a closer look at the phone bill. She initially told me she talked to him a few times a week, but I saw that it was actually several times a day every weekday. I blew up once again because it actually took an explanation from me for her to admit that these flags are blood red. I stormed out of the house, came home a short while ago, and a lot of her and our son's belongings are gone. So that's where we are. I spent the majority of my childhood in a household where English was not the primary language. Father remarried someone of his nationality, I'm half, and I never learned the language, so I didn't talk much. She hated me for existing, deeply religious, and Dad never told her he had another kid till after marriage, so I spent most days lost in imagination in my room. To say it was a loveless household is an understatement. I did find a note she left that said she was staying with a work colleague to give us some space, and that she wouldn't call or text. Not sure what to believe given the circumstances. Mom was on the other side of the country, and while I did alternate some years with her, she is very quiet like me. Father had a large extended family, and I craved the interaction with my cousins, but those opportunities were few and far between. I was willing to weather the storm to get to feel like a kid a few times a month. I think I'm beyond screwed on this one already. Been available to them for 7 hours, and I'm not sure much more can be said that hasn't been said. Playing detective is an exhausting way to live. Maybe I can just assume the worst at this point. Phone restoration apps mentioned earlier look like a good shot though. The emotional outbursts have gotten significantly worse over the last few years now that I think about it. They were not this bad. Well, I've slept maybe a total of 5 hours the last 2 nights and have not been able to eat since Friday. Physically, I feel at my lowest point in as long as I can remember. I'm exhausted. The relationship was rocky before this, and after this discovery I don't feel it is recoverable. I don't have the energy for it. I did get texts regarding the thread. She read it later last night and seemed pretty upset about some of the things that were said. She assured that she was at her coworker's house, but she is also a proven liar. I felt like an idiot after initially sending her the link, but she tried to make me feel crazy for thinking that their relationship was inappropriate. It felt good for her to see the consensus of others here that it was. I don't think she is reading any longer. We talked briefly on the phone. She read up to a point of the thread and couldn't take that, what she called, false assumptions. Then she mentioned that she didn't want to have to come on here and start talking about how violent I can get during my outbursts. I yell and break things. I figured that much could be assumed when I admitted that I blew up in earlier posts, so I'm not sure what else she can say about that. Wife and son have never been in danger when I get angry. Dishes and toys are another story. If this is the start of the DV accusations, I don't know. Update, just keeping busy and back at work. And still taking it all in, but it's getting harder to discern the posts that are trying to offer practical advice and the posts for those who seemingly just like to hear themselves talk. I'm not sure how to respond to the continued feedback that my actions were horrid and she should have left. I admitted to both several posts ago, and I now have a plan to address it. But it seems some won't be satisfied until I get a time machine to undo it. Things seem to escalate about as quickly as my temper around here. I admit to yelling and breaking things during these childish tantrums, and several posts later I'm seeing prison mention. I can definitely change. I went through some intensive and patient therapy in my early 20s to deal my issues. I was a totally different person for a couple years. But I moved, lost my support system, and didn't find a new one. So, I eventually returned to the comfort of what I knew best. However, these yelling and breaking outbursts have only resurfaced a couple years ago. I spent most of my day yesterday with my son. The plan was for me to leave so that my son can stay in his home and I start the divorce process. But when I tried to put him back in Mom's car, he got upset because he wanted to come with me. I instantly broke and felt like a failure to him. So, I went back home. Wife and I have not sat down and talked about anything yet. She still says there has been no contact whatsoever with him. If we were to divorce, she would return to her home state with our son. She has a support system there for him. I am active military and have none here. The thought of being without him for any length of time is hard to swallow. Whether she would agree to a poly, I'm sure she wouldn't like it, but she would do whatever is asked of her to fix this. And while I'm sure she will eventually, I still highly doubt she is reading any of this. My comment: you need to get to the truth, and if you need to start pushing her for answers, that's your signal to sending to the curb. Story 3. I have recently discovered this site and am hoping you can help me. My story: we have been married for the past 9 years, together for 14, and have 2 kids, a 6-year-old and 3-year-old. 3 months ago, my husband told me it was over. This was nothing new, as he'd threatened this many times before, but this time, he was serious. He had been traveling for work since February and coming home once a month for a weekend. We hadn't been close in a while, but we still loved each other, or so I thought. We were planning a holiday together for just us without the kids, as we really needed some alone time. He came home from a trip in May and told me it was over. He couldn't be with me anymore and was leaving. I had a suspicion there was another woman involved, which he denied. He had had a Facebook friendship, as it turns out, with a girl at work for the past couple of years, since her partner passed away. I had an idea that she was interested in him, but never thought he would feel the same way, as she is not his type. She also has 2 kids, 7 and 3, and he's not that into kids. He loves his own, of course, though. Anyway, he moved out and I didn't know where he'd gone, but after a few weeks found out he'd moved straight in with her and her kids, having never even met these children before. He sees his kids every other weekend. He stays at our place, as I don't think it's appropriate that they meet the new girlfriend yet. He spends the entire weekend texting her, so my kids tell me it's as if they can't bear to be apart. It's made even harder by the fact that we all work together. They are so happy and I am miserable without him. We did have our share of problems and we were taking each other for granted, but he never gave us the opportunity to fix things before he walked out. I never in a million years thought he would ever leave, as we've had many tough times, come through them all. I want my husband back so badly that I am crying all the time. However, he is so happy with his new life and is telling others he has met his soulmate. He turned 40 about a month before he ended this, so I have wondered if he is having a MLC. Oh, and he has told me he is not ever coming back, but I don't know if it's just that he's angry or just very happy with the I don't think he can say never. Or am I just kidding myself? I don't want to believe he is lost to us. I don't think he's thinking straight right now and has alienated so many people at work, as well as his lifelong friends, because of what he has done. This isn't the man I married, and I just want the man I married back. Are things likely to go bad though? Or is he really happy with his soulmate and her kids? He says they can talk to each other about everything and they never judge each other, and that's something he never had with me. I have been going to counseling to try to change myself and become a better person. I do want that. I want our family back together, but don't think he will ever leave her, as he loves her. They've only been together just on 2 months. Is it still the honeymoon phase? Or maybe their relationship really is meant to be. It would never be the same. It's just so hard to deal with the fact that we got married for life, and now he is so happy with someone else. I can't even think about it without crying. I'm in New Zealand, where the law is very, very different. No such thing as alimony here, and everything is split 50-50. He isn't even forced to pay half the mortgage on our house. It's a joke. So, there isn't really anything that I can do. He earns almost twice what I do, and while he will have to pay child support, it isn't much, and I will end up financially screwed while he is living a great life with his new family. I believe I could forgive. I have thought of nothing else for the past couple of months and really would love a chance for him and me to work this out. He's my husband and should be home with his family. He should have given us the chance to make things work. Our problems were mainly lack of communication caused by him talking to instead of me, for our sake as well as our families. My comment: he chose to run away. He has shown you that is not your husband, other than on paper. The fact that he refuses to work things out just proves the point. You, now, need to find your bearings in this new normal for you, so you can at least function on a day-by-day basis, especially for your kids. It is not going to be easy, as many here can attest. And it's not going to be quick, but it most definitely will get better, that's a promise. How soon and how fast is partly up to you, and how you choose to tackle the situation. The more actively you participate in moving forward, the easier it will be for you to feel in control of your situation. Do you guys have any solutions for detaching? How did you overcome detaching from someone? Comment down and see you in the next relationship lesson.